This is Andy White, and he did a special study on total coliform.
Thanks for letting me interrupt your stuff there. That's good. I paid him extra for that one. I did a special study. It was basically about sampling and sampling interference, right? And the purpose is not to say that you can be lackadaisical or careless about how you sample, but to kind of demonstrate how hard it is to cross-contaminate your sample because of your sampling method. If you're using a reasonable sampling method and you're following your protocol and you get a positive, definitely look at it as it's in the water. These are my results. I have the results overall, right? And you can see I only had 13 out of the last 490 sampling events at conferences like this. It went too far. We did 97 samples yesterday, and we got 5 positives, really 4.5, because one of them I would have sent back and said, you guys got to resample because it wasn't very clear. It was indeterminate. But 5 samples out of 97, that is, in fact, a violation, right? So that doesn't mean that you guys should be lazy or crazy about taking your samples. But I really do think that it means, even with getting 5 positives out of almost 100, right, that if you get a positive sample from a distribution sample, start looking in the distribution system right away. Don't try to say, okay, well, he didn't hold his mouth right and he was on his left foot instead of his right foot, right? It's in the water. You may never find it, you know, even if you do resamples and you're really thorough, but go ahead and assume that it's in the water and try to address it there before anything else can happen. That's really all I got, and I really do appreciate your time. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Our next presenter is Ron Moore. Ron Moore is a drinking water specialist contractor with the Texas Optimization Program, TOPS, and a financial, managerial, and technical program, FMT, program with the Texas Rural Water Association. He's had over 30 years of operating and managing surface water plants. He's currently had 3 TCEQ licenses, B Surface Water, B PAT, and CSI. Ron has for the last 3 years owned and operated a business in the DFW area, which does backflow testing and repair, customer service inspections, and assists water plant and groundwater systems in Texas. Please welcome Ron Moore.
Well, good afternoon. It's a privilege to be here, and I wanted to give a special thanks to the TCQ and to the TOPS program for all they do, because I know they don't get enough thanks. Okay, let's get started. We're going to talk about cross control here. Okay, so here's a little overview. We're going to look at some hydraulics and the basics. We're going to look at several steps in starting a program. We're going to look at some of your local regulations. We're going to look at your customer service inspections, your CSIs. And we're going to look at a little bit of testing the backflow prevention assemblies, or BPATs as we call them. Our goal is just to understand the basics. This is a real basic course, what we're doing here, and on how to start a cross-control program, some things you need to do. There's just some hydraulic basics. That middle one looks like our distribution stockpile there after we got through with it. Definitions, what is a backflow? A backflow is just an undesirable backflow of water. It's usually because of a pressure difference. It's going to just, actually like it says, it's going to just backflow. And it can pull contaminants that you don't want. That can be a liquid, a gas, or a semi-liquid. But for our purposes, we're going to be talking about water. So how does a backflow happen? Well, there's 2 different ways it can happen. The first one we're going to talk about is back siphonage. And that's usually going to happen when you get a pressure difference. That can be like in your distribution. You can have a leak. From TCQ, I mean, when you go under 20 PSI, you're going to start pulling stuff in. A lot of times you're going to start back siphoning everything. This is what I was doing. I was helping a city do directional flushing to try to get the residuals up. And we'd come around, we were on an 8-inch here, and we're flushing. The operator told me, he said, we can't get residuals here. And so all of a sudden I heard a pump motor cut on. I looked up there, and there was a well up there. And so I said, whoa. And so I go and we pulled a couple of the, on the meters there, and the meters were just spinning backwards. And I'm like, oh, shut it down, shut it down. That day we found 12 of them, some of them on the commercial stuff. So they were going to do immediate CSIs and you either air gap those, or cap them, or put RPZs. That's one of those that's an immediate concern when that happens. Definitions. How does a backflow happen? Well, we already talked about back siphoning, now we're going to talk about back pressure. Usually back pressure is going to come from an elevated or from a pump. A lot of times that's going to be man-made. That's not something that will normally occur, although it could, but it's going to usually be, it could come from, like I say, from your elevated or from a pump. Okay, let's talk about health hazards, or I will just call them health. And that's a substance that may cause death or severe illness. And one comment that I do want to make here is a non-health can become a health hazard real fast out there. You can have something that, oh, you think it's a non-health, and that can become health real fast. This is one here. I was on an apartment complex doing a CSI, and that was a chiller, and it didn't have any backflow prevention at all on it. Well, it does now, but at the CSI, of course, I failed it. Non-health. See, and that's a substance that generally, it won't hurt you, but like, let's say like in a restaurant, you know, you could backflow from the coffee machine or juice machine. It won't hurt you, but it doesn't taste very good, doesn't look very good. It's kind of a pollutant. But for example, what I was saying about non-health, that swimming pool there and that irrigation there, those can become health hazards real quick. You let that swimming pool go, and we know that, for about a month, what will happen? You don't get out there and get the residuals on it. On the irrigation, it depends on how there's OSSF on it and those kind of things like that. It can become health real quick, or if they're using chemicals. So there's 3 steps to a backflow program. And so this kind of goes over what you need to know and what you can do right now. So starting a backflow program. So do you have local regulations? Hopefully most utilities do. Do you have customer service inspections? Most utilities do. A lot of people use third parties, and we do a lot of that. And do you have a backflow test and maintenance program? I would say that almost all utilities have some type of a cross-control program. Local authority. What other rules does the public water system need? You need to adopt an adequate plumbing ordinance, usually the UPC, IPC plumbing codes, or you need to have a good service agreement. And it's very important that you have these and that your customers know exactly what you have. Local authority. One of the elements you're going to need is enforcement clause. That's very important. You're going to have to enforce the plumbing regulations that you want, the customer service inspections, and the BPATs. Lead restrictions. That's a big one, especially in the older stuff. We see a lot of that. Ban unacceptable plumbing practices. Well, that would be something you'd certainly want to put in your ordinance and have on your plumbing code. And what makes the regs stronger? Right of entry. That's a big one right there. You've got to have a right to get on that property and look at everything to do with that water. That is huge. Tailor requirements to the system. You want to kind of take your system and kind of make it to what's going to fit what you need, because every system out there is going to be different. And as it says, some can be stricter than TCQ. So you can always do a lot more than what TCQ says. Don't ever do less. You cannot do less than what TCQ says. Where do you start? Well, customers with existing service, here's the point. You cannot suspend service for refusal to sign a service agreement per the PUC, the Public Utility Commission. But you can request an approach. I would be very nice to them if I was going to do that. You try to get them, but a lot of times, people sit there signing something where you can cut their water off. It can be difficult there. But when you have new customers with the water service, you can start right off with having them sign the service agreement. TCQ sample ordinance and service agreements, you can see a lot of that on the TCQ website. They got a lot of great stuff on these, on service agreements and that kind of thing. Great piece of information on that. Customer service inspections, some of the key regs. So how do we find hazards and cross connections? Well, we do an examination of the private water, all their plumbing and stuff. I start at the meter and kind of go from there, see if I see anything going on, see anything attached to that meter. And I go to the front yard, I see if they have an irrigation system. Do they have a well there? Do they have a rainwater system? Do they have hose bib vacuum breakers? on their faucets. I do the outside first. I completely go through that and do a walk of the entire grounds. I look at their, if they have backflow assemblies, I look at them, make sure they're installed correctly. And then we also want to look for, I like that word potential, because that potential can be a lot when you're out there in the field, because you can see a lot of things that can be a potential hazard. You can, but anytime you fail a CSI, you need to be able to back it up on why you failed it, because it may cost that customer some money. And so they may come back. A lot of times you get pushback from them. So you just want to be sure that what you're doing, that, you know, it's going to make sense. And the best way is to talk to them, I think, and educate them while you're there. You always want to check for lead. If you see any solder joints, even if it was built yesterday, you want to take a lead sample and see what it does, at least take one. If it's something like a hospital or a school, I may take 3 or 4 or 5 lead samples all through there. So I want to make sure we don't have any lead in there. Or if we do, we get that taken care of. And another thing too is, you know, we're CSI inspectors. We are not plumber inspectors. So we're different. Customer service inspections. When do you need a CSI? Well, in the state of Texas, all new construction needs a CSI. That's a given. You're gonna do that. And you need to do that before you allow that client to have water. An existing service, when the water purveyor has reason to believe that a cross connection or other hazards may exist, they have the right to do a CSI. Hopefully they have that written in their ordinance and that kind of stuff, that they have that authority to do that. Another one is if they've done like a bunch of different plumbing stuff and all kinds of stuff going on there, you need to do a CSI. Make sure that everything is correct. Customer service inspections. So they've received a CSI, now what? Well, at any residence or establishment where an actual or potential contamination exists, additional protection may be required at the meter in the form of an air gap or a backflow prevention assembly. I have not seen a meter air gapped yet, but I've seen a lot of backflow assemblies there. But it doesn't necessarily end there. I mean, we do a lot of stuff internal on cross connection too, because we want to take, especially at schools, hospitals, restaurants, carbonators, these kind of things. We want to make sure that not only do we take care of the city at the meter, but we want to take care of all the people in there, especially if you're like a big chemical plant or some type of a factory. I want to make sure those people are taken care of in there. We don't want their workers getting sick or any of that kind of stuff from cross-cons. Like it says there, it does not end at the meter. So just to kind of recap here, in customer service, the who and the why, they're needed in 3 cases. We suspect hazards. They did a plumbing expansion of some type, or it's a new construction. I mean, a lot of what we do is new construction, but we do a lot of the other too. And why do we need CSIs? Because you're going to provide or deny that customer water. So it's very important. So CSIs can be done by a licensed customer service inspector with a TCQ license. That's what I have. It can be done by a plumbing inspector with a plumbing license, or it can be done with a plumber with a water supply protection specialist with a plumbing endorsement. I don't see a whole lot of those, but there's some around. So where do you start? Identify hazards. So this is the hazard appendix. I don't know if you can really see that, but if you look on RG 478, you'll find this, and it's good to take a look at, especially if you're starting kind of looking at what you want to look at on some hazards. I mean, there's some stuff that's common sense out there, like hospitals, mortuaries, chemical plants, those kind of things. But you can always go and look and see what's on there. Irrigation with OSSF on them. Those are all, you want to kind of look and see what you've got on there. Okay, this is one here. Any of you CSI people know why I would fail this one? You can see, okay, and we want to make sure those soap dishes are air gapped. If they're not, we're going to put an assembly on those. Over here on that ice machine, see that filter there? Want to address that, and I'll give them the option. If that ice machine has an air gap inside, I'll give them the option. You either can remove that filter or you can put RPZ on it, or health. I don't tell them RP, I tell them health. And then if you look down at that drain, like we've said, those are not air gapped properly. So I did fail that one. Anybody know why I would fail that double check valve there? Because it doesn't have the little the little caps on it. If they're underground where they're subject to flooding, we want the non-porous screw-on caps that will protect that. Especially on that number 1 port that's before that assembly. If that one starts leaking, you're going to get a cross connection. This one here, very common, little hose bib vacuum breakers. I happen to have one in my pocket. So those are very handy. That's the most common cross connection you're going to see out there. I see those all the time. This one here, CSI that I went on, the one on the left there, was they were doing big heavy equipment with a pressure tank hooked to a big soap thing, about 100 gallons of soap. And I'm like, okay. I know Brandon was with me on that one. We won't say where it was. But anyway, so we wanted an RP put on that one. And on that one, I also recommended that the city put an RP at the meter just because of all they had going on with a bunch of heavy equipment, big RVs and stuff there. This one on the right, there's a story that goes with that one, of course. So that one was on a funeral home where they embalm people in East Texas. So anyway, I go to it and I checked the original RPZ. I felt it on a relief valve. And I talked to the owner and I said, it's in a construction area where they're doing a lot of work on the street and stuff. I would advise you to get a plumber, permit it, and move it up in the yard there somewhere, up out of the way. He said, okay. He called me about 3 or 4 days. He goes, RP's in. Can you come test it? And I said, sure. So I go there and I'm looking around the yard and I don't see any RP there. And I go and I ask the lady, I said, where's the backflow assembly they put in? She goes, it's out front there by the building. So I go out there and I pull it up and I look at that and I'm like, huh? That's one of those you take a step back and you look at it and you go, wow, that's an RP put in backwards below grade. And this is where they're going to embalm people. So I went and I asked the lady, I said, did the plumber permit this? And she goes, I think so. I said, may I talk to him? And so she called him and he didn't answer. Big surprise, he did not answer. And so I called the Public Works Director. I know him and I said, you're not going to believe this one. And I told him and he said, really? He said, you're serious? I said, yes, sir. He sent his guy out there. They cut the water off that day. And they told this place, this funeral home, that they had to permit that they had to have a proper permit, have that RP installed correctly. In about 4 days, I went back out there and it was done correctly. So we got that taken care of. Those are the kind of things that kind of scare you a little bit, I would think, that we see. I wasn't even doing a CSI. That was a BPAT, but we still. Customer service inspections. So what do you want to look at? One of the things you want to see is how an old or an alternate form, incomplete certificate, remarks, and was conducted by a properly licensed individual. And you're going to maintain that for 10 years. Now, one of the things here, if you use a third party, like some of the third-party tracking, you can't even put that in there until it's complete. The computer will not accept it. And if you're a city, I would not accept one that was not. And if he failed it, then you want to know the reasons and pretty good verbiage as to why. And a lot of times when we fail it, we also suggest on what we want. We don't just give the problem. We want to kind of give the cure. In other words, do we recommend, and it's always up to the water purveyor, but, we'll recommend, do we want, health or non-health, or what do we want there? And like I say, it's up to the water purveyor. And usually they'll go along with what their CSI says is reasonable. I haven't had a city yet tell me no. Testing backflow assemblies. Can I cross-connect? Well, the answer to that is no, absolutely not. So you cannot have any connection from any public water supply system, cannot be allowed at any resident or commercial where a hazard or a potential hazard exists. This is under TCQ rules. Like I said, the water purveyor can do a lot more as far as that on their water system. Testing backflow assemblies. What should I install? Well, that's where you really want to kind of talk. A lot of it can depend on what their ordinance, what their service agreement says, and what kind of hazard are you looking at. And you can also, like I said, RG 478. You can go look on the RG 478, the appendix. I believe it's on page 35, if I remember, somewhere in there. You can take a look at that, and it will tell you a lot of the hazards and what you want on there. It'll tell you non-health, health, and those kind of things. So there's the hazard appendix I was talking about in RG 478. The RG 478 is a good one to read. It's about an inch thick. It takes a while to read it, even more to remember it. Testing backflow assemblies. When do you test? Well, if you get installed one or you just worked on one, you need to test it right then. If it's on a health, you need to test it. If that water purveyor can say, and I've seen a lot of them now, they say that they want all backflow assemblies that are testable to be tested annually. I've seen some of them do them every couple of years. You know, it just depends on what the water purveyor says. But all health annually for sure. So there's the key regulations about health. It tells you, well, what I just said about the health hazards. They also got to be tested and certified within the operating parameters. So, testing backflow assemblies, backflow prevention assemblies, only done by licensed backflow prevention assembly testers. Test upon installation, at least annually for those on health hazards, and often they're done more frequently if the local authority wants to. And we have some right there. We have RPZ, we have a double check valve, we have a PVB, we have an SBB. I know we've got several to do when we get back. I've got a PVB to do in the morning. Now, if you wanted to know which one of these were health, the PVB and the SBB and the RPZ are all health. The double check valve is non-health. Now, when you look at your PVB and your SBB, they cannot have any back pressure. Anytime you see that VB on there for vacuum breaker, you cannot put back pressure on that. Okay, that's our test forms, reviewing the test forms. You want to make sure it's not an old one from 2019. That would be really old. I haven't seen those. You want to make sure that the original is signed and dated. You want to look, see if you got an incomplete. If there's any remarks that I want to say to the city or to the water purveyor, I put them under remarks. If you repair one, you need to tell them what all you did. You need to only put OEM parts in there. I always say that. I replace check valves, OEM, and I'll give a number that I got from the manufacturer on those. You want to have a valid tester's license. That is that. And also you want to make sure on here that your gauges are in calibration that you used on that test. That's an important thing. And you want to make sure that's on there. And you want to keep that record for at least 3 years. So kind of what I just said, that's the TCQ maintenance report. It's going to be filled out and submitted by the BPAT that did the test. That's a very important thing because you want to make sure that you as a BPAT, that you put that test in yourself, that you were the one out there doing it. Because you're signing a legal form that you did that test and that those numbers are what you saw on your gauges. So, I mean, that's very important. Testing backflow assemblies. Tracking the backflow assemblies in your system. There's some water systems that use a spreadsheet program, some that can have programmable due dates, and they keep all the backflow on their radar. The third-party record-keeping companies, I'm seeing a lot of people go to that, especially your larger cities. Like I'm going to use Dallas and Fort Worth. They have like the third party. They just have a huge amount of these to keep up with. And so these people that are set up with it, with their IT programs and stuff, with their software. And so it automates. And then, so you just have to, if you're a water purveyor, you just have to kind of figure out what works best for you. Well, I guess we're at the end of it. Are there any questions on backflow, cross connections? Well, I always got war stories. Well, I was just telling Catherine that last week I was on a large CSI, and I'd already failed it, but we got to the end of it, and we noticed on the toilets, these are commercial toilets, you usually expect those to be okay, but you never take anything for granted without looking at it. I never go, that's okay. Don't do that. I don't do that. You want to look at it and see because I've seen so much. But they had in the kindergarten classes, and there were 12 of them, they had the AVB set and run on the base of the toilet. UPC, IPC plumbing code said they got to be 6 inches. So the good thing about it was the water purveyor was there with me, and he said, absolutely, we want the contractor to fix that. So, and the thing is that contractor's going to spend a lot of money. He's going to have to tear those bars out of the wall, and he's going to have to fix all those toilets. He did smile at me, but I know he wasn't happy. And also, the master plumber was there, and I looked at him and I go, that is UPC plumbing code. And he's like, uh-huh. He didn't really say anything, but I know that he knew, or he knew it. But see, the kindergarten had the bar there too low. So, yeah, they did. So, I know my son Brandon's worked with me a lot. We've seen a lot. Brandon likes to fail toilets. They're not on the critical line there. The UPC plumbing codes and IPC plumbing codes say they got to be an inch. Brandon will fail them if they're 3/4, you know. He didn't cut any slack at all. I might be nice enough and just adjust it for him or something, but he'll just fail it. But that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of things out there in the field. One of the things I'd like, we do a lot of the cookie cutter ones, and I do a lot for like 3 or 4 contractors that know me. I rarely ever would fail one of those because they already know what we want. We come out there, we start at the meter, start going through that. That contractor, already, he knows me by first name. He knows about when I'm going to be there. Matter of fact, I've had him call me up going, hey, you're running about 15 minutes late. I'm like, I'll be right there, man. And, so they kind of that. So do I need to go? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Ron.
told you I'd keep talking.
Thank you, Ron.